Mr. James Maduekeh, pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure,
And
me too.
being part of Africa Finance Corporation, just briefly tell me a bit more about your organization.
Okay. So African Finance Corporation is a multilateral institution that was set up 15 years ago to address the African infrastructure needs. So we are one of the major players in providing infrastructure solution to across Africa. We are in 42 member countries, and to date we've deployed around by 11 billion in the continent.
$11 billion.
Dollars, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
And we were talking earlier about risk as well as raising capital. So where do you raise your capital?
All right. Okay. So as you know, the infrastructure gap in Africa is huge, and part of what we do is to mobilize private capital into Africa, and we do that in different ways across different instruments, which I'll mention a few, and across geography. So one of our major pool or source of capital is in the capital markets. So in the last 14 years, we've raised money from the Eurobond market, anything from 500 million to 1 billion. And those funds are used to drive infrastructure development in Africa. In terms of, and obviously we have syndication, we have bilateral loans from other DFIs, which make up the bulk of where we raise funding. And then in terms of geography, historically, we've raised money from the West. But in recent times, we've started looking at other emerging markets, looking at China, looking at Korean markets, and the likes to raise capital.
In the context of BRICS and the business summit that's taking place currently, how much appetite have you established? Do you think there is enough interest, and are there any promises that you see on the horizon in terms of your capital raising efforts?
Okay, so I think the BRIC provides a platform. Obviously, South Africa being a member country, provides a conduit. Provides visibility to other African countries. So if you take, for instance, Nigeria, which is the largest economy in Africa, South Africa is a gateway into Africa. So what this summit promises us, it gives us access, gives us platform. If we look at China, who is a member country, we know that they've done a lot in Africa in terms of infrastructure financing. They started very early because I think their objective were clearly defined. So I think part of the objective here would be to have a clear, defined objective with other BRIC countries in terms of how they support Africa, how they, in terms of infrastructure financing, and how we collaborate to crowd in private capitals across our footprints into Africa.
And what is the potential for growth of whoever participates in your capital raising efforts, at least from the South African point of view, and how do you mitigate the risk for those who may not have operated in your space?
All right, okay. So one of the things that AFC does is we originate, and then we de-risk, and then we distribute. And we firmly believe for us to develop, for Africa to develop, Africa must industrialize. For Africa to industrialize, we need to raise capital. Which requires significant amount of capital. And so part of what we do is to come up with innovative and creative way to raise capital in an environment that is already challenging. So if you look at what has happened in the last 1 year, Feds, globally, with the Fed hikes, this is a very tough time to actually raise capital, given the interest rate hikes and inflationary pressure, geopolitical risk, and all that. So part of what we do is to look at innovative and creative way to raise capital, as well as look for regions where we see opportunities, appetites for Africa. And then in terms of de-risking, there are several ways that we de-risk. using insurance, using AFC guarantee to enhance the credit, and obviously from the treasury aspect, we also focus on managing, mitigating market risk from the infrastructure financing, and that's one of the things that AFC have done very well, in the investment that we've done in Africa. It's not just deploying funds, but it needs to be structured and managed in a way that makes it attractive for investors, and that includes de-risking, market risk, and other risk that would deter investors from actually investing in Africa.
Well, very interesting. Africa Finance Corporation, it is, right?
Yes.
And James, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you.